Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. We're going to talk about Joel Embiid today. We'll be back to the full-length podcast tomorrow, but the NBA had an election pause yesterday, so there's no games to have takeaways from. However, what we did find out was that Joel Embiid has been suspended for 3 games following an altercation with a columnist, which resulted in Joel Embiid shoving that reporter. Now, I've really brought up this situation quite a bit when the columnist first came out with the report and Joel Embiid responded to it, and then after the altercation, I've milked it for all it's worth at this point, but we're going to get one last thing in, and this isn't just about this instance, but it's about Joel Embiid's career in general, because it just seems to be setback after setback on what could have been, what still has the potential to be a legendary, great career, all-time career, but it's just been marred by so many setbacks. In this case, is just another example of that. To begin, Joel Embiid did not play the first 2 years of his NBA career as a result of injuries. So with that, you kind of rob yourself of 2 years of potential development, and obviously he's turned out just fine in terms of development. But, the best practice early on is being able to train with fellow NBA players and being on the court with fellow NBA players. So he missed out on that for the first 2 years of his career. Ultimately, it didn't matter in the end, but that is one setback that could have really hindered his development, although ultimately he became an MVP caliber player. It is worth noting that he did miss the first 2 years of his career. The one thing that makes it especially worth noting, though, is that the year after drafting Embiid, the Sixers went and drafted Jahlil Okafor. And Okafor went on to have a really solid rookie season. So if that was able to continue, and Okafor's play ultimately didn't decline, Okafor kind of had to jump on Embiid in terms of, in the span of Embiid's first 2 years in the NBA, Okafor comes in during Embiid's second year, and he comes in and instantly produces. So there is a world out there where Jahlil Okafor ended up being the guy for Philadelphia 76ers. Ultimately, Embiid would win out. But, it was a potential setback that ultimately Embiid was able to overcome. And it creates a precedent of overcoming these setbacks that we haven't necessarily always seen from Embiid. And now, with more and more setbacks, as it seems in recent years, who knows if Embiid is going to be able to come back from some of these. Now, the next setback I want to talk about is just injuries. And regular season-wise, there have been spans where he misses a lot of time, sure. Obviously, those first 2 seasons he missed entirely. But in general, he consistently plays 50-plus games. And during his MVP season and the year before that, he played over 65. So there have been spans where we have seen what a healthy Joel Embiid can do. And that's a top 2 center in the league, one of the best scoring bigs that we've ever seen. So I think that's why it's so heartbreaking when we see him get injured, whether it is in the regular season and we mess out on some games, or whether it's in the playoffs. And that's the real notable part here, is that it seems like Joel Embiid is always dealing with nagging injuries in the playoffs. And that always seems to affect his play. And so oftentimes that is used to say, hey, yes, Embiid didn't play well in this series. However, he was dealing with some injuries, so just wait till we get a healthy Embiid. But at the end of the day, we don't really get to see that healthy Embiid. And year after year, it just seems to be injuries. But moving on, that brings us to our next topic in terms of setbacks, and that has been playoff disappointments. Because year after year, the 76ers, they might be a high seed in the regular season, but come playoff time, they always exit early. Joel Embiid has never made the finals. As a matter of fact, he's the only MVP to never make even the conference finals. Because there's been MVPs like Steve Nash, like Derrick Rose, who have failed to make the finals, but Embiid is the only MVP award winner in history to fail to even get past the second round in all of his career. And part of that can be the situation around him, sure, but a lot of the blame can fall on Embiid himself and his production consistently dropping in the playoffs. In the 2022-23 season, that was Joel's MVP year. He averaged 33.1 points a night, making about 55% of his shots from the field. In the playoffs, though, his points dropped by almost 10 points to 23.7 points a game and 43% from the field. Now, those in themselves are serviceable numbers, even if you would want the field goal percentage to go up. Just because, as a center, most of his offense is going to come in the post, in the paint area, where he should be making those shots. However, with Embiid in the playoffs, the issue isn't always the counting stats necessarily. It's both the playoffs drop-off in production and the fact that we expect more from him because he is a star in this league. He is an MVP winner. We want to see him improve. We want to see him thrive in the playoffs. I don't want Joel Embiid to fail as an NBA player. I would love to see him be an all-time great. The league is better when we have more great players. However, there always seems to be setbacks with Joel Embiid, and it's really a tragedy, and it's led to just a disappointing career overall when you look at his real accolades in terms of team success, as well as just kind of the discussions that can be had around him due to injuries, due to playoff setbacks, early exits. Now, when he's on the court, especially in the regular season, Joel is great. Even though he missed the first 2 years of his career, he comes in, he's instantly a 20-point-per-game scorer. He is one of the most talented scoring bigs that we have ever seen. And that's part of what makes it so disappointing, because if this was just a mediocre center, who cares, right? So what that he might drop in the playoffs? But Joel Embiid is a player that we have seen flashes of brilliance from so often. But he fails to put it all together in setback after setback. In this recent report of Joel Embiid shoving a reporter, and I would argue it was justified, but it's still a 3-game suspension, and he still hasn't played this year. That's another setback, and this is a guy that we expect greatness from. And as a result, when we don't get that greatness, when he can't even get on the court, and when he struggles in the playoffs, we are disappointed because we want to see Joel Embiid be great. And so often he makes us have conversations that we shouldn't be having because of the level of player that he is, because of the talent that he has. We shouldn't be having conversations about if Joel Embiid is a top 5 player in the league. We shouldn't be having conversations about if he is truly, truly elite, about if he's ever going to win a championship, because he has the talent to do it all. But playoff exits, early playoff exits, injuries, and setback after setback have made it hard to put Joel Embiid in those discussions as often as he should be. And it just creates a nuance to it, to his legacy, that we really shouldn't be having. But as a result of everything we've seen from him, despite the obvious talent that is there, despite the great player that he can be and so often is, it has ultimately been a disappointing career for Joel Embiid, never making the conference finals. And his one MVP, a lot of people say he didn't deserve that one. Well, the year after that, he comes out and has, I would argue, the best season of his career. He was averaging 34.7 points a night, I believe it was. And there was a point there where he was averaging 36. And he was going, if he continued that pace, he was going to be the highest scoring center besides Wilt Chamberlain of all time in a single season in regards to points per game. No center is as great a scorer besides Wilt and Kareem, really, as Joel Embiid is overall his whole career. Because a guy like Shaq, yes, he had an elite peak, especially for the era where it was a little bit slower. But in terms of year-by-year production, as Shaq aged, his production really declined. But Joel Embiid, he hasn't experienced that decline yet. And so to this point, Joel Embiid is one of the best scoring centers that we've ever seen, even perhaps over a guy like Shaq. And in the waning years of his career, even if his production does decline, I still would consider him to be an elite all-time scoring center, no doubt. The talent is absolutely there, and I thought Embiid, if he continued on that trajectory and continued to have a healthy season, although he ultimately did not, he would win his second MVP, and that was going to be the one that he really proved that he earned. But ultimately, it didn't happen, and Embiid faced another setback, and that was injuries. Another painful thing about Joel Embiid's season last year is that when he got to the playoffs, he got to play in some games, and he averaged 33 points a night. But ultimately, it just ended up being a complete season, and it's just another example of setback after setback for Joel Embiid, a guy who has had a disappointing career for just a level of talent he has. And I want to see him succeed, but it's been setback after setback, and we're just hoping the best for Joel Embiid. And this recent report coming out, now he's been suspended 3 games, is just another example of yet another setback for Joel Embiid, unfortunately. That is all for today's bonus episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you for listening. This was one of my favorite episodes. We're just trying to get better each and every time. We're just 17 years old, getting into sports broadcasting, and it's going to be a process for sure. But we're going to try to get there, just improve every single time, be better every day. Thank you for listening. This has been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.